So, let's talk about something really interesting, something kind of counterintuitive from the world of psychoanalysis. It's a story about a secret deal, a pact that's made deep in the mind, and it's actually pretty tragic.
And that brings us to the central question, the big paradox of it all. I mean, we expect sons to want to go out and do better than their fathers, right? To make their mark. But what happens when a son who has all the potential in the world just keeps failing on purpose? It just doesn't seem to add up.
Well, the answer, at least according to the framework we're looking at today, is, well, it's pretty shocking. And it's heartbreaking. It's not about being lazy or rebelling or not having the talent. It's about a really twisted, really profound form of love.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this strange situation, we first have to understand what's supposed to happen. The normal path. So let's do a quick run-through of the standard playbook for how a young boy develops, psychologically speaking.
So it kind of starts like this. The son desires his mother, and he sees his father as this huge, powerful rival. And that creates this deep-seated anxiety, right? A fear that this big, strong father is going to punish him. Now, to solve this, he doesn't pick a fight. Instead, he starts to identify with his dad. He starts to internalize his dad's strength, his rules, and that's how he eventually becomes his own person.
And it all boils down to this one simple, powerful thought. I can't beat him, so I'll become him. It's like a victory through copying, By becoming like his dad, he gets rid of the threat and gets all the mental tools he needs to go out and build his own life.
Okay, but this is where our story completely flips the script. Because that whole playbook we just talked about, it all depends on one absolutely critical thing. A father who is seen as a powerful, formidable rival.
So, what happens when that's not the case? What if the son looks at his father and he doesn't see a king he needs to overthrow? What if he sees a man he just feels sorry for? A man he sees as weak, or broken, or failing?
And this is the absolute crux of the whole thing. The son's deep-seated fear does a complete 180. It's no longer the fear of being hurt by the father. It becomes this deep, gut-wrenching, guilty fear that his own success, his own power, will be the thing that destroys the fragile man he loves. The fear isn't about protecting himself anymore. It's about the terror of hurting his dad.
So you have to ask, how does a person's mind even deal with that kind of guilt? Well, it comes up with this incredible, but totally self-destructive defense strategy. He doesn't fight back, he just gives up.
It's a thing called altruistic surrender, and it's an unconscious choice to just throw away his own potential. He honestly believes he's making this noble sacrifice to protect his dad's feelings, but in reality it's a warped kind of love that ends up crippling his own life.
This is the unspoken deal. Deep down, this is the pact he makes with himself. Every time he gets close to succeeding, it feels like an attack on his father. Every win feels like a betrayal. And so the only way he can show his love, his loyalty, is to stay small, to stay harmless, to fail.
This whole dynamic completely rewires his conscience, what Freud called the superego. Instead of having this inner voice pushing him to be strong and successful, it becomes like a prison guard, making sure he never steps beyond his father's own limitations. The new rule is simple. You are never allowed to be stronger than him.
You can think of it like this. His life force, right? The drive to build and create, that gets slammed on the brakes because it's seen as dangerous. And that lets the opposite instinct, the drive toward self-destruction, toward retreat, take the wheel. All that energy gets turned inward, and he starts sabotaging his own life just to keep this fragile peace.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? This isn't just a bunch of theory. This internal struggle creates a very specific and often really tragic pattern in a person's life. And a lot of the time, he's seen as the good son who never caused any trouble.
You see it in the guy who is clearly talented, but just never finishes anything. He'll get so close to getting the promotion, or finding a great partner, or finishing that big project, and then, boom, it just falls apart, seemingly out of nowhere. He might even end up becoming his father's full-time caretaker, which gives him this noble-sounding reason for why his own life just never really took off.
And when you put the two paths side by side like this, man, the difference is just staggering. In the healthy route, the son wins his freedom, but in this pity-driven path, there are no winners. It's just a stalemate. The son is trapped by his loyalty, and the father is never challenged, he's just protected in his own inadequacy. It is a lose-lose situation that's disguised as love.
So in the end, this act of surrender, what feels like love, it's actually the act of building a prison. A prison that isn't made of steel bars, but of pity and rules that no one ever speaks aloud.
And you know how many people are locked up in this prison? It's not a big crowd. The sentence is for life. And there are exactly 2 inmates.
And that's the gut punch, right there. The son thinks he's protecting his father, but what he's really doing is trapping them both. The father never has to face his own shortcomings, and the son is locked into a life that's just a pale shadow of what it could have been.
It really leaves us with a heavy question to think about. You know, we always think of love as this force for good, for growth, for freedom, but what this makes you ask is, can our deepest love, when it gets mixed with pity, actually become the strongest cage of all?